What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Fightful Wrestling Weekly on location. Because I'm not at home, I'm on vacation. Joining me is Tim. Tim, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good here. How's your vacation going?
It's going good, except for you called me right in the middle of some business. But, whatever. Was taken care of.
It's all good.
So let's kick off this edition of the Fightful Wrestling Weekly with some stuff about the most recent Future Endeavor receiver. No, he didn't even get a Future Endeavor. He didn't get one.
No.
Big Cass. So let's kick it off with Big Cass and see what Sean had to write about it.
So Sean writes, information is filtering in on Big Cass, the Big Cass firing just 2 days after he had, quite frankly, the best match of his life. Vince McMahon called a private meeting. Huh?
Absolutely. It was probably the best match of his career.
Vince McMahon called a private meeting that was so early that most people we spoke with didn't even see Cass in Toledo at the show. Contrary to what was circulating on Tuesday, there was no public meeting in which Cass was fired in front of everyone. WWE has been known to have some longtime employees flown to television tapings to fire them, and they even flew Jericho in at one point to tell him they would not allow him to use NXT talent for his cruise.
Yeah.
So Sean goes on to write that as far as why we're being told that Big Cass had a heat on him both from management and wrestling standpoint. There was long-standing rumors that Cass was a brash supporter of Donald Trump, which likely didn't do any favors considering WWE's diverse roster, but was barely brought up with the people we spoke to. As it turns out, he was a little unruly on the European tour and his drinking got out of hand, but that was hardly the only reason. So Sean goes on to talk about other things like how Big Cass kind of went farther than he should have with a little person segment where everyone knows the story probably by now. They said, big boot him and you're done. He said, well, can I beat him down? And they said no, and he did it anyways.
Before you continue on there, just the fact that what we saw on television and then learning after the fact that all that's supposed to happen was that initial, it was kind of a scary thought, putting your person in that midget shoes. That's horrifying.
Right, and I mean, when you look at it on their YouTube and like the replay and stuff, literally the big boot and then it fades out.
Yep.
Like they were not happy about that. I mean,
I wouldn't imagine.
Right. So they go on to say that. Yeah.
I would say if you go against Vince McMahon's wishes, it's probably not the best idea.
Oh no. So he goes on to right here at the end of this part of the story. We've also heard stories of Big Cass being confrontational backstage and even making attempts to kick visitors out of the locker room area who were all well known in WWE circles. He was seen as a pain to work with from a production standpoint and a management standpoint and not a positive presence, breaking down doors on tour buses even. So, I mean, that story goes, apparently they were on the tour bus on the European tour. And he goes to use the restroom on the bus, and the latch is messed up. He thinks they're playing a joke on him, trying to lock him in, so he breaks the door literally off. And guys have to use the bathroom with no door.
Good Lord.
Yeah, so this Cass thing, it's like every day we hear a new story of, man, they should have fired him then.
And one thing I do want to mention, giving him the benefit of the doubt, a lot of guys like Chris Jericho and Eric Bischoff on their podcast, they talk about, even at the end of the first UK tournament, what did Triple H say to Pete Dunne? Make a name for yourself. Maybe Big Cass was thinking in his head, look, I don't have Enzo anymore. I'm coming back from an injury. I'm extremely, extremely ice cold with the fans right now. I need to do something to get myself some heel heat. And he probably thought, look, I'm going to do this. They're going to hate me. And Vince is going to see, maybe that was a good idea.
But I think you're supposed to get that heel heat on TV, not backstage, because he never really got much, if any, heel heat on TV.
That was his. Said, I'm going to beat down this little person, which will give me heel heat. Yeah. But I think he could have naturally gotten that heat, being that he was feuding against Daniel Bryan, who's going to be at a constant state of being white hot.
Right.
You could have got that heel with good promos if he would have sat there and talked to Bryan and said, look, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I'm thinking about saying this. What should we do?
Now to that
he didn't go that way.
To that note, there's a story that came out today that a couple weeks ago when they did the whole interview on the ramp, on the stage with him and Renee Young, they were supposed to practice that interview earlier in the day. Cass never showed up to rehearsals and just thought, we'll wing it. And Vince and Kevin Dunn did not like the promo itself. how long he went, because he went longer than the time he was supposed to go. And according to that story, because the promo was so bad, they fired the writer that wrote it. All because Cass wouldn't practice earlier in the day, didn't show up for rehearsal.
Cass is no Jericho, Cena, even Owens.
He ain't even Enzo, he ain't even talk his way through a promo and make it sound good.
It's everything about that promo was really uncomfortable too.
Oh yeah,
it was the back to the crowd. It was just I don't understand.
Well, they did the back to the crowd. They did the back to the crowd thing with Jerry Lawler and AJ Styles too, and it's what they used to do back in the day. So they were probably thinking, "Hey, let's give this a little old school feel," but it just didn't work.
I do feel bad for the guy because I feel like he never really, he was doomed from the start once him and Enzo split.
Oh yeah,
and then the injury, and then from that it was downhill. I do feel bad for the guy, but I'm sure he'll pop up at indie shows here and there. And speaking of indie, I don't know, would you call these guys indie? I don't know. It's a little promotion out in Japan. They're super small. I think only a couple people have heard of them. I think it's called New Japan.
I think you might be right.
They're a real small promotion. One of their stars, I think he's like the champion or something. Seems like Kenny Omega, something like that. He did an interview with Access TV ahead of All In. So let's
the
send
G1
you over
special, not All In.
The G1 in San Francisco.
G1 in San Francisco.
G1 in San Francisco, which we will be attending. So we're going to send you over to a clip of that right now.
When you face a guy like Chris Jericho, who's wrestling into his late 40s and doing it so well at a really high level, does that motivate you to maybe follow the same path? How long do you see yourself wrestling? Could you see yourself into your mid to late 40s, or do you see yourself maybe wrapping it up a little earlier than that, or maybe a lot earlier than that?
I mean, Chris Jericho, he was the original guy that I modeled my own career after. So, it would be almost semi-poetic for it to end in the same manner as well. I mean, I never see myself in the near future starting up a rock band or anything like that, but I do really respect that Chris Jericho branched his own brand out, and he did so many other side projects. I mean, he has not only a rock band, but he was on Dancing with the Stars. He had his own comedy series. He wrote an article for metal bands and stuff like that, reviewing albums and such. So, in terms of what I'd like to accomplish as champion with New Japan, it's a lot like that. And E3 was a big step. Not only working and collaborating with WWE, but just having a presence there and something that wasn't just strictly wrestling related. That's exactly what I'm looking to do. It's not just to carry the belt out for every single house show and wrestling related show that New Japan has to offer. I don't think as a champion, especially a world champion, that should be my first and foremost concern. We have such a deep and talented roster. I think the house shows will be fine with those guys. I think it's my job to bring more eyes to the product, and with the skill set that I have, I do believe I'm well equipped to not only do just what's required in the ring, but outside of the ring as well.
If you do want to hear the entire conference call, head over to Fightful.com. Now, we're going to talk about the Raw and Smackdown production notes, as we always do, but Sean, there's a little interesting thing about Sanity in there you might not know.
Interesting. Anyways, okay, so as always we talk, Raw and Smackdown production notes, as Sean always gets the scripts. He puts them up on FightfulSelect.com, but there is something very interesting this week when it comes to Sanity in their debut. Sean writes, sort of a weird situation on WWE SmackDown Live this week. Fightful.com ran a story on SmackDown announcers being told not to reference NXT at all during Sanity's appearances on the show. There was no explanation given when I reached out on why this was. Now, here's what I think this could have been. They wanted Sanity to come in there and just be like these crazy guys that came out of nowhere. They're going to cause some ruckus, cause some chaos. And if you think, they're NXT, even though most people probably know this, it's like, well, isn't that the developmental brand? Aren't these just guys that they just trained and now they're bringing them up? So I think that was maybe one of the thought processes of it, of we don't want them seen as guys that just came from our training facility. We want them just as these crazy-ass guys that are coming in and they're going to run havoc over the tag team division.
No, I think it's something completely different. No, Sanity didn't really do anything groundbreaking in NXT. They didn't do anything revolutionary.
They're the tag champs.
That doesn't matter. So are the Lucha Dragons, Tim.
Anyways.
But what I'm saying is they didn't do anything that was really talked about or on, really big on social media. So that way you can kind of, like you said, package them as basically brand new guys no one's ever heard of before. They didn't do anything. They weren't very impactful to NXT. Yes, they were in the War Games match, but so was Undisputed Era, and so was Authors of Pain.
But they were very popular in NXT.
They were popular in NXT, but so was Bayley. And how often are they referencing NXT for Bayley now? How often did they reference NXT for Bayley when she came up?
A little bit.
If it didn't involve Sasha, was NXT talked about?
A little bit.
Exactly. I don't know what episodes of Raw and Smackdown you were watching there. But I do think the main reason is they didn't really do anything big. So let's just pretend these are brand new guys.
True. So Sean goes on to write that this week's Raw script, which is posted on FightfulSelect.com, featured some scene settings and direction notes like fading up to Kurt in the ring, establishing Kurt Hawkins in the ring, and stuff like that. It went in depth on the scripting of Bayley and Sasha's shots where Banks drove off. He says
I don't like knowing that it's so heavily scripted sometimes.
I mean, hey, it's got to be sometimes.
I know.
He goes on to write that I posted a look word for word how WWE set it up on Twitter, which you can check out below. He goes on to say that other than that, there was nothing particularly outstanding other than it telegraphed that there would be Dolph Ziggler versus Seth Rollins in a rematch next week, but there was no real mention on if someone was winning a championship.
Interesting.
So, as far as SmackDown goes, he says that SmackDown's name was Fight Night Gauntlet, and Raw was titled Monster in the Bank.
Which I do really like SmackDown's shout out to Fightful there. I think that's really, really sweet of them.
Okay.
Give them some credit, you know what I mean?
Unless it was a shout out to Fortnite.
Yeah.
Because Miz called it, he called it Fort Line though, never mind.
Fort Line or Fork Knife, as a lot of people call it nowadays.
On the comment.
But Raw and SmackDown this week was actually not terrible.
No. Better than normal.
It was bearable. The Gauntlet match was phenomenal. I loved it to death.
I mean, the Daniel Bryan Bludgeon Brothers thing is still a head scratcher. I don't know where the hell that's going.
It was weird.
But Sean finishes it off here saying, commentary notes say Kofi Kingston put a show-stopping performance in during the Money in the Bank ladder match, but wasn't able to overcome the odds. So, I mean, and they said that verbatim.
He didn't do that. I mean he didn't do super well.
He did the big trust fall onto everybody to the outside, but that's nothing new.
Yeah. I do think Kofi's a very reliable professional wrestler, though.
Right.
And speaking of reliable, do you know where to get the most reliable wrestling, MMA, and boxing news at? Do you know where? Do you have any idea?
Fightful.com.
It's at Fightful.com. And the guys at Fightful have a podcast called The Listen Ya Boy. And we're going to send you over to a clip from Listen Ya Boy right now. Enjoy.
I think we should move on. I want to talk about something that's going to become even bigger. This is WWE's Global Localization Initiative.
Yeah.
And Melissa has an image of Triple H that I want to put up. And at the time that this happened, I didn't think as much about it as I'm thinking about it now. She's going to put up a photo. Anybody that's on our audio only, this is Triple H when he was at the annual Business Partner Summit that they do around WrestleMania time for clients and advertisers and whatnot. In the background is a map of the world, and he's got the NXT logo over certain areas like Europe and the Middle East and South America. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because WWE has announced that they're going to be starting something called NXT UK. They're going to be doing 8 live events starting in late July, followed by shows in August, October, and November. They're debuting 2 new titles, the UK Women's Championship and the UK Tag Team titles. Presumably it's going to air on the network. I know Triple H said they don't have a broadcast platform yet, but I'm assuming it's going to air on the network.
Yeah.
And here's a quote from Triple H in the press release when they announced NXT UK, and this is a telling quote. He said, "This is the next step in our ongoing strategy to create localized content and further develop our brand globally." Now, obviously, UK right now is big for WWE. I think it's number 2 behind the US. And so, obviously, they went to the UK. They're trying to do stuff in India, as we know, and in the Middle East, as we know. And so, maybe we're going to see NXT India. That's possible. They had South America on that map with the big NXT logo on it. So they're going to try something in South America. This is the vision that they have. I think this is Hunter's vision. And it looks like they're going to do the NXT branding in every market they go into, because then they can do crossover between all of the different markets. And that's what it looks like they're going to be doing. This is essentially WWE taking over the world, Sean, in terms of pro wrestling. It's very much like what Vince did in the 80s, except they just kind of scaled it up a notch. They're going to go into all the major markets. They're going to scoop up all the talent and all those local markets. They're going to create their own NXT brand in that market. And they're going to basically own the business. That's what they're trying to do. What do you think?
They're trying to do. It's so funny. I mentioned this on the Q&A show. Impact and Ring of Honor have changed roles. You remember how you would watch stuff on DVDs in the network and it'd say courtesy of Ring of Honor?
Yes.
Well, now they're getting courtesy of Impact, and they don't want Ring of Honor doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see number 2 as a threat, but they will treat number 2 as if they are a threat.
Yes.
That's the way that they act, and more whatever they want to do, it's their business.
Yep.
I was very surprised they let the New Japan or the New Day Elite thing happen, considering that. As far as the NXT global situation, Triple H pretty much telegraphed this Saturday night on the media call, youtube.com/Fightful. It's available. He said that he'd like to do these for these regional areas, and I could see an NXT Japan in the future. I could see that. I could see it happening for a lot of different places. Anywhere that they see talent being cultivated, by and large. Needless to say, you won't see an NXT China for quite a while until they get some people that don't absolutely suck come out of China.
Yeah.
And I also put it like this. What can WWE do with 20 bearded white European guys? Okay, just give them their own promotion. Why not?
Yeah, what's that one tag team they call them? Mustache Mountain or something?
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah. But it kind of goes to what you just said.
Well, they all do look. So many of them look exactly alike.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing happening, and I think it's really telling of this. This is going to be their strategy, and who knows what the next one's going to be. But this is their path. That's what they're going to do.